Hello dear friends, and let's move on to the second part of the phosphorus cycle, that is the microbiology of the phosphorus cycle. In the previous lecture I had discussed about the basic elements of how this phosphorus is brought into the elemental cycle. Though there are not much reactions as compared with nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, etc., but this phosphorus nevertheless does form a significant part of the biological system or the biomass and needs to be recycled. So if you see the significance of phosphorus in the human or the biological system, the input of phosphorus is very important for food production as well as food consumption, because all the plants they need adequate supply of phosphorus for successfully growing into a mature plant. That plant, when it will mature, it will give rise to fruits, etc., or the parts of the plants which will be consumed as food by the humans, that transfers the phosphate from one biological system to the another. If there is a deficiency of phosphorus, now this will result into deficiency in the crop yield, reduction of the crop yield, and phosphorus therefore forms a very important element in the life of all living systems. The main function of the phosphorus in humans is formations of bones, teeth. It is also a part of the nucleic acid, DNA. It is important. It plays a very important role in the energy generation, ATP. It plays a very important role in how we use the carbohydrates and fats. It is also needed for us to make proteins, and proteins which are needed for growth, maintenance, and repair of the cells and tissues. Phosphorus therefore is a very vital element when it comes to normal growth of any cellular system. As we have already seen, it is a component of DNA, it is a component of ATP, and its insufficient amounts can result into abnormal cellular growth. Apart from that, humans have found the use of phosphorus in many other systems, like manufacture of safety matches. Red phosphorus is used. Pyrotechnics, that is the fireworks which are there, and even for some of the shells, bullets and arms and ammunitions, the guns and the gunpowder which is there, it contains phosphorus. Phosphorus is also used in the manufacture of steel and in production of a combo called as phosphor bronze. Phosphates are ingredients of some detergents also. Most of the detergents, they are added with phosphorus, and phosphorus is used to make LED bulbs. Nowadays the energy efficient bulbs, LED bulbs which are there, they contain phosphorus as an important component. Now this phosphorus cycle, it differs from other cycles. If you speak biologically speaking, other elements like carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, it is different from it in the sense that it lacks a significant gaseous component. Phosphorus doesn't exist in the form of gas, and that is how it is different from the other elemental cycles. Nearly all the phosphorus which is present in nature, it is present either in a solid form or it is present in an aqueous form in the lakes and the basins and the sediments which are there. Unlike the components of other matter, you have to remember this very important point, that phosphorus cannot be found in air. It is not present in air, it is not present in a gaseous form. This is because the phosphorus which is there, it is usually liquid at normal temperatures and pressures. And the normal atmospheric temperature and atmospheric pressure, it exists in liquid or in solid state. It is mainly cycled through water, soil and sediments. Major cycling is through the natural elemental cycle. Microbiologically, though significant from a microbiological perspective, the rate of phosphate solubilization by microorganisms is very slow, and the contribution to the natural phosphorus transformation is very less. In the atmosphere, phosphorus can mainly be found, even if it is there, in small dust particles in the form of dust, but not in the form of gas. Now if you see here, phosphorus has similar oxidation states as that of nitrogen. We have seen that in nitrogen it exists from -3 to +5. Similarly, +5 of inorganic phosphate esters to +3 of phosphine. So +5 of inorganic phosphates, then +3 of phosphite esters, +2 +1 elemental phosphate which is 0 highly reactive, and phosphine pH 3. It has an oxidation state of -3. So it has similar oxidation states of nitrogen, but however, one has to be very clear that there are no critical redox reactions or redox transformations as seen in the case of nitrogen, or there is no gaseous phase. So this is somewhat the significance of phosphorus when it comes to the phosphorus cycle. Now if you see the mineral forms of phosphorus in soil, as I said, it mainly exists in the solid or liquid phase in the soil. In the soil, the distribution is according to the variation of the pH. So if you see from 0 pH to 8 pH, if you see the soil salinity or the acid content of the soil, the percentage distribution of phosphorus in the soil, it varies on this earth with respect to the pH which is available. So mostly at acidic pH it is fixed with respect to iron, aluminium and manganese, means it is chelated. You can say iron phosphorus, aluminium phosphorus or magnesium phosphorus. Such chelation or fixation is there. Fixation by hydrous oxides of phosphorus with respect to iron, aluminium and magnesium takes place at 6 to 7 pH. In this range 5.5 to 7.5 pH, you can see fixation by hydrous oxide is there. Whereas fixation means chelation. Phosphorus is never free. It is present in combination with other elements. Therefore, it is not available for the biological system. It has to be solubilized. It has to be removed from these iron, aluminium or magnesium or manganese with which it is attached. That is what the fixation is all about. So this, or chelation you can say, fixation by soluble Fe, aluminium and Mn at 0 to 5.5 pH. From 5.5 pH to 7.5 pH, it is fixed by hydrous oxides of iron, aluminium and magnesium. Whereas from 8 in the alkaline range, fixation is mostly in the form of calcium phosphate. That is, the alkaline soils, they have this as calcium phosphate. We call this as rock phosphate, and this rock phosphate is the major amount of phosphate available on the earth. So relatively available phosphates, you can see as small non-significant silicate reactions are also there, which reacts with silica, and silicate phosphates are formed. So this is the mineral phosphate, which are mineral forms of phosphates which are available in the soil, and their percentage distribution is with respect to the pH of the soil. And mostly phosphorus is not freely available. It is fixed with some other atom molecules like iron, aluminium, magnesium mostly, and in the alkaline or near neutral soil it is fixed mostly with calcium, and it exists in the form of calcium phosphate, which is also called as rock phosphate. Now if you see the reactions involving any element in general, and if you categorize it into 3 areas, that is the input of that element and how it recycles in the ecosystem, and how it is lost in the sense utilized by the biomass and released back in the environment. If you see these three systems mainly depend upon a variety of reactions. Like if you see, I am talking about a general ecosystem here. Phosphorus is very limited in its action. This red blocks 3, these are majorly with respect to phosphorus. Okay, even I have not shown microbiology here because it is very insignificant when it comes to the global phosphorus cycle. Nevertheless, see here phosphorus inputs which are there. These phosphorus inputs can be categorized into, or the reactions which take place with the phosphorus input into the ecosystem, it can be bought with respect to, not in terms of phosphorus. If you talk in terms of general element, then chemical weathering of rocks will release that element into the soil. biological fixation is there with respect to other elements like nitrogen and carbon, but phosphorus is not biologically fixed because it is not present in the form of gas. Then deposition from atmosphere, that is, in the atmosphere it is present in the form of gas and it can be deposited. That also is ruled out here because it is not present in the form of gas. Fertilization, that is the plant process, that is also not there. So chemical weathering of rocks is the only way by which this phosphorus from the nature is input into the ecosystem, means made solubilized of, that is rain, lightning, etc., as we saw in the last lecture. A non-significant small reaction of phosphate solubilization by phosphate solubilizing bacteria does takes place, which we will see in the next part of this lecture. In the ecosystem, when this phosphorus enters by chemical weathering of rocks, or as I said, by a small reaction of phosphate solubilization, then here also with respect to other elements there are variety of dynamic reactions going on, like transfer of nutrients between primary producers, plants, soils, the benthos system, the biota which is there between organic and inorganic forms, changes in the ionic forms, biological uptake takes place. But phosphorus, with respect to phosphorus, nothing of this dynamism exists. Interaction with mineral surfaces takes place. Soil phosphorus which is made available in the soil is due to rains or by phosphate solubilizing bacteria, and that is uptaken by the plants. The herbivores, they eat the plants, and from there the phosphorus transfers from the primary producers to the primary consumers. In the last or the third stage, where phosphorus is to be released back into the environment, with respect to other elements, leaching is there, gas emission is there, fire, volcano, harvest, nothing. In phosphorus, wind and water erosion is the only way by which this phosphate can be lost back into the environment. So if you see, phosphate, it is made available or solubilized as a long-term reaction. It is a reaction which is taking huge time on the time scale, long time scale. How many years? Thousands to millions of years. You can see phosphate in the rocks. By soil erosion, rain, lightning, erosion, it is added into the lakes. We will let's call this as a basin, a land basin, water basin is there. Then this is one reaction. Follow the LED light on the slide. So phosphate from the rock, it is solubilized into lake. Phosphorus or the phosphate mining by humans, then fertilizer containing phosphate which is added to the fields, then animals which are consuming and the manure, etc., animal waste, and the decomposition of organic matter in the soil, that when there is rain or soil erosion is there, that ultimately adds it into the lake. So decades, it may take decades, it may take thousands of millions of years for this reaction, for phosphate to become available for the biological system. Okay, so the phosphorus cycle, it is partly on the ground or terrestrial and partly on the aquatic system. So there is a phosphorus cycle in the aquatic system and a phosphorus cycle on the terrestrial system. Recycling of this phosphate is very slow because no biologically important form of phosphorus is present in the gaseous form. Okay, if it was present in the gaseous form, then most of the living systems like humans, plants, and microorganisms, they follow a pattern called as respiration, and there the gaseous form of the element is very important. But as this phosphorus does not exist in the biological form, phosphate becomes a part of the terrestrial or the marine ecosystem, and is ultimately it settles down in the marine sediment. And in the marine sediment, any element which goes down at the bottom with sediments, it is not available for the ecosystem, so it becomes a part of the sediment, and it may take millions and millions of years to solidify, become a rock again, and then it uplifts as a mountain, and then these mountains will erode again, and then they will become available to the ecosystem. So see, the cycle is very complex. it is on the time scale, it is taking millions and millions of years. Means the mountains or the rock phosphate eroding, going into the sedimentation, and then again forming mountains, millions of years it requires. But even though this is the global perspective of what is happening with the phosphorus cycle, the phosphorus cycle, it does cycle throughout the biosphere, through the water, the earth's crust, living organism, and it is one of the most important limiting factor for the plant growth. What do you understand by a limiting factor? It is one parameter which greatly affects the biological reaction of growth. Means if it is not available, the plants, they fail to grow properly. So NPK, fertilizer, phosphorus forms a very important component of the crop fertilizers which are being used by humans. So due to this artificial fertilizer production and increased enhanced industrial production of phosphorus, the impact of human activities on the phosphorus cycle is very great. Of course it is negatively impacting, because humans, they have been clearing the forests, they have been removing large amount of phosphates from the earth to make fertilizers, and this has led to erosion of soil, mountains, and the phosphate is leaching into the water. Once it leaches into the water, it will sediment down, remember this thing, because it cannot be converted into gas, it will sediment down, and there it will remain for millions of years. Nevertheless, as I said, our main focus will be on the microbial transformations of the phosphorus cycle. So how this phosphorus, it transforms, there are variety of reactions. This is just a flow sheet to give you a broad idea of how the inland basin, that is from soil organic phosphorus to the inland basin, is whatever the amount of water which is standstill or which is flowing on the surface of this earth, which is accumulating phosphorus. So the soil phosphorus and the inland basin or the inland organic and inorganic phosphorus, they are greatly impacted by the chemical physical process and the microbiological process. The red reactions are all microbiological, the blue reactions are all chemical or physiological. Now you can see here insecticide. If these insecticides are biodegradable, then that will be biodegraded and added to the soil. If there is a soluble phosphorus present in the soil, then this will be either leached into the soil by the natural physico-chemical process and it will remain there, means it will get fixed there in the soil, or by microbial process that will be solubilized and made available to the plants. So rock phosphate, which is one of the most important and the major forms of phosphorus in the ecosystem, is also solubilized by microorganisms, you can see, or it is also given into the water bodies by weathering. This is a physico-chemical reaction. So on and so forth. You can just pause this slide here and take a look into the direction of the arrows and the color of the arrows to understand whether the process is microbiological, physiological, or physical or chemical. So this is how the microbial transformations in the phosphorus cycle takes place, and this is a very simple reaction. It is not as complex as that of the nitrogen or the carbon cycle, where the redox reactions and the what you can say, the oxidation reduction reactions, they and its state plays a very important role. So here it is just in 2 to 3 steps, the whole phosphorus, it moves throughout in the nature, and it is taking huge amount of time to get transformed. Now let us just see the microbiological significance or the importance of this phosphorus cycle. So as I said, here you see this cycle on the top. This inorganic phosphorus, that is rock and soil, which contain either by lightning, raining or runoff through lakes and streams, it is added in the form of inorganic phosphate into the water bodies or in the soil, from where the plants, they absorb and they assimilate it. Once it is assimilated, it is consumed by animals and they metabolize it and they store the phosphorus in ATP, that is triphosphate, that is phosphorus. And when this organism or the animals, they die, they decompose, and again they give back the phosphorus in the soil, there it again sediments, leaches, or how much amount of phosphorus is made soluble and given back to the biological system. That balance is depending upon, as I said, the pH of the soil and also the environmental conditions. So limited reaction cycle this phosphorus cycle is, but microbiologically speaking it has a great importance, because phosphorus, as we have seen, is a very important nutrient for the living cells. DNA, RNA, ATP, phospholipid bilayer, cell membranes, all these components, these contain the element phosphorus. And not only that much, most of the bacteria, algae, fungi, they store this phosphorus in the form of reserve food material. It may be stored in the form of intracellular volatile granules as polyphosphates in both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So this is also a reserve food material of most of the prokaryotic systems. One more thing, it is a limiting factor for the growth of plants and algae in the lakes. So that is one way a positive statement, one way a negative statement. If it is a limiting factor for the growth of algae in the lakes, then not allowing the phosphorus to leach into the lakes will automatically control the growth of algal blooms. These algae which are growing on the lakes, I will show you, are very harmful for the ecosystem. The average concentration of phosphorus, organic or inorganic, which is added in the wastewater, because the sewage, it also is an important contributor. Sewage, we have seen in the second year the sewage microbiology, major amount of sewage when it is containing the defecated matter or decomposing matter, kitchen wastes, food wastes, there is a significant amount of phosphorus, and the range is around 10 to 20 milligrams per liter, and that is sufficient for the algae to grow on the lakes. So when these wastewater is added into the lakes in the form of sewage, or when rainwater it runs off, agricultural runoff it is called as, when it rains on the agricultural soil where there is a heavy addition of phosphate fertilizer, and that along with the running water and the soil erosion is added into the lakes. How many times we have heard that there is a heavy rain and the whole field is lost. Field is lost means tons and tons of soil, it runs away with the rainwater, and where does it go? It goes and gets sedimented into some river, and there it sediments and remains there for millions of years, and there it forms rock phosphate. So this is how the phosphate it moves in the ecosystem. Now the major transformations of phosphorus in aquatic environments are, it can be summarized in 4 steps, that is mineralization, then assimilation, that is accumulation, and precipitation of the phosphorus compounds, and finally the most important from our study is microbiological phosphate solubilization. That is, the insoluble form of phosphates are solubilized by bacteria. How does that thing take place? That is what is the point of discussion here. So these 3 to 4 steps which are there. The first is mineralization. Organic phosphate, that is the compounds which form the organic phosphates like phytin, inositol phosphate, nucleic acids, then ATP, phospholipids, all the macromolecules which are rich in phosphate are mineralized to orthophosphate by a wide variety of microorganisms and bacteria which are present in soil. Bacteria like Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus species, Arthrobacter, these are the important bacteria which mineralize phosphate. Even actinomycetes like Streptomyces and fungus like Aspergillus and Penicillium are also involved in the mineralization process. So mineralization is conversion of this organic phosphate to orthophosphate by a wide variety of microorganisms. These phosphates are also acted upon by enzymes, that is phosphatases are the enzymes which are responsible for degradation of the phosphorus compounds. Whatever the phosphate rich compounds are there, the group of enzymes called as phosphatases, these are responsible for breaking down these phosphates and converting it into a soluble form. Once it is available in a soluble form, the next step takes place, that is assimilation. Assimilation is again done by microorganisms. They assimilate phosphorus which enters in the composition of several macromolecules of the cell. As I have been repeatedly telling, DNA, RNA, phospholipids, it becomes a part of that system after solubilization, assimilation, that is converting this available phosphate into the cell component, becoming a part of the cellular component. And also, as I said, some part of some species of microorganisms, they have the capacity of storing these phosphate molecules as reserve food material. So once, even if the phosphate is transferred from the after mineralization, is assimilated in the form of reserve food material, that also is a assimilation reaction. Finally, the precipitation of phosphorus compounds takes place. The solubility of orthophosphate is controlled by, as we have seen, the pH of the environment. Either on the terrestrial system or on the aquatic system, the pH of the environment plays a very important role in solubility of this phosphorus, because it is present chelated or fixed with calcium, magnesium, iron, aluminium, so on and so forth, and there, once it is precipitated, it is not available for the biological system. When precipitation occurs, there is formation of insoluble compounds like calcium phosphate, that is also called as hydroxyapatite, or vivianite, iron phosphate, vivianite, or variscite, that is aluminium phosphate. These are all metal chelated compounds. Once it is chelated or fixed or precipitated, it is not available for the biological system. Then again it has to be solubilized. Now here, weathering of the rocks, heavy rains and lightning has very less role, but rains when it falls continuously over the millennia, over the period of time on rocks, on mountains, then this phosphate may get solubilized and it will be added into the soil, added into the water, and available for the biota or the biotic system. So now let us see the point of our interest as a final part of this discussion in this phosphorus cycle, the microbiological solubilization or the microbial solubilization of insoluble forms of phosphorus. There is a group of bacteria called as phosphate solubilizing bacteria, PSB, or phosphate solubilizing microorganisms, PSM. Through their metabolic activity, microorganisms, they help the solubilization of phosphate compounds or the phosphorus. During their metabolic reactions with the help of enzymes, the mechanism of solubilization of phosphate takes place, and this primarily involves enzymes plus huge amount of acids which are produced during its metabolism. Variety of metabolic reactions, this gives rise to a variety of acids during the catabolic and anabolic processes. These acids, they react with the fixed phosphorus and phosphate is released. So we will see this, how it takes place with respect to microbiological solubilization. Microbial solubilization of the insoluble phosphorus, it mainly involves enzymes. Enzymatic reaction during the fermentation plus special class of enzymes like phosphatases, they are involved in breaking down of this fixed phosphate into free and soluble phosphate. Then there is a second factor which is responsible for solubilization, that is production of organic and inorganic acids by the microorganisms. You can see a huge variety of reactions here produced by microorganisms during the metabolic pathways which they are encountering during their growth. Alpha ketoglutarate acid, tartaric acid, fumaric acid, glycoxylic acid, malic acid, citric acid, acetic acid, isobutyric acid, so on and so forth, a huge range of acids which are formed during metabolism and during their growth. These acids, they, along with the carbon dioxide which is released during this, they lower the pH of the environment, and at a low pH the solubilization of phosphate may take place. So combining with acids, the release of phosphate from the fixed elements may result, and there is also production of H2S gas this H2S, which is a part of in the anaerobic respiration system, H2S is released, and this H2S may react with iron phosphate and liberate orthophosphate, and the production of chelators which can form complex with calcium, iron or aluminium. So the microorganisms, they interact with the insoluble form of phosphate in a variety of ways, not only one single step, but with the help of enzymes, with the help of various acids being produced, with the carbon dioxide which is released, with the H2S gas which is released, so on and so forth. They can release the insoluble phosphate into a soluble form. Now this is one area which is not exploited in the field of agriculture. Means the production of phosphorus, even in my first lecture I told you that the human impact has been very great. Now if with due respect to the slow reaction of the environmental phosphate transformation, if we shift our focus from the chemical fertilizers to biofertilizers, maybe we can contribute to the ecosystem. So anyway, all these organic acids which I just mentioned, these are capable of forming stable organometal complexes with various metal ions found in the soil solutions, and this process may lead to the release of inorganic phosphorus associated with aluminium, iron or the calcium in the soil minerals. The production and release of oxalic acid is one such example by the mycorrhizal fungi, that is the WAM fungi, vesicular herbascular mycorrhiza, WAM. So these WAM fungi, they release oxalic acid and they convert this insoluble phosphate into soluble phosphate and make the phosphorus available to the plants. So this phosphate solubilizing bacteria, they have an indirect impact on the positive growth of the plant and the ecosystem. So this is one area which has to be explored by the researchers. That is what my point is. Now the availability of organic phosphate to support the microbial growth, the plant growth, animal growth, etc., it depends mainly on the rate of degradation and what is the rate and in how much time, how much amount of free phosphate is generated. So this availability is mainly dependent upon the rate of reaction, and unfortunately at this point of time this reaction is not that fast, but research can be enhanced, genetically modified microorganisms can be used, and this rate can be accelerated, because there are various types of enzymes harbored by these microorganisms like phosphatases, nucleases, phytases, which are involved in the degradation of these insoluble forms of phosphate and releasing the free phosphate. Enzymatic hydrolysis of organic phosphate is a very important step in the biogeochemical phosphorus cycle, including the phosphorus nutrition of plants, the nutrient supply or the uptake by microorganisms, and transfer of organic phosphorus from soil body from soil to the water bodies which is there. So if this can be balanced, that is the use of biofertilizer, with the help of biofertilizers, then we can contribute to a great extent to the ecosystem. Now finally, let us see some interesting characteristics of this phosphate solubilizing bacteria which I have been talking about. These are called as PSB or PSM, phosphate solubilizing bacteria or phosphate solubilizing microorganisms. There are a number of bacterial species which are beneficial to the plant, and these are mostly present in the rhizosphere. Therefore they are called as rhizobacteria. Now one more important terminology which I am going to tell you is, remember this group of rhizobacteria which are beneficial to the plant, they are also called as plant growth promoting rhizobacteria or PGPR or plant growth promoting rhizobacteria. Now phosphorus, as you all know, is a very important element for the development of plant, and it forms 0.2% of the plant weight. Dry weight means if you take a plant material and find out the dry weight, 0.2% of that is phosphorus, and plants acquire this phosphorus in the form of a solution, soluble form by phosphate ions, Otherwise it is present in the precipitated form, as I just mentioned. So in the precipitated form, the phosphorus is highly unavailable. It has to be solubilized to inorganic form, and this inorganic phosphate compounds like the tricalcium phosphate, dicalcium phosphate, hydroxyapatite and rock phosphates which are there, these insoluble inorganic forms can be solubilized by bacteria. So different bacterial species, they have the ability to solubilize the insoluble inorganic phosphate compounds like tricalcium phosphate, dicalcium phosphate, hydroxyapatite or rock phosphate into soluble phosphate, which will be made available to the plants. So if you see the phosphate solubilizing bacteria in the center here, they convert the insoluble phosphate to soluble phosphate by a variety of reactions, and you see by H plus ion secretion means acid production, they can convert the rock phosphate, that is calcium phosphate, they can free the calcium and the phosphoric acid. And this is also done by chelation or acidification, that is the calcium is removed from the phosphate by acids which are being produced by the phosphate solubilizing bacteria. Which are the acids produced? These are the list of acids which are produced by the phosphate solubilizing bacteria. By production of this acid, they secrete H plus ions which interacts with the fixed or the chelated phosphate, and the chelated like rock phosphate, it contains calcium. The chelation, calcium is removed, phosphoric acid is released free, phosphoric acid is added in the soil, that is made available to the plants. Similarly, exopolysaccharide production, EPS production by the phosphate solubilizing microorganisms, as they have a reserve food material, they also have exopolysaccharide in the form of reserve food material, and this when they are secreting, that interacts with the calcium plus the exopolysaccharide is removed. Exopolysaccharide removes the calcium and phosphoric acid is free for the plants to be utilized. Similarly, there is one more reaction called as siderophore production. This siderophore is a iron chelating compound, that is when the iron which is present in the soil in unavailable form, that is chelated with phosphorus. Iron which is, see, iron is also one perspective, it is not available to the plants. Iron is also needed. Similarly, phosphorate is also needed. Now as we are seeing phosphorus cycle, we are focusing mainly on phosphorus, but iron is also an important component. Like for example, if you think about green vegetables, if you think about beetroot, we say beetroot is rich in iron. Okay, tomato is rich in iron. So plant, they need iron also, and iron is not available because it is fixed with phosphorus, it is fixed with other elements. So to remove this iron and make it freely available to the plants, there is a component called as siderophore, and this siderophore is a metabolite, a microbial metabolite which chelates the iron. So it is a win-win reaction, a two-way reaction where iron is also made available to the plants and the phosphate is also made available to the plant. Huge research is being done and has been done on siderophore production, and this enhances the crop production. And phosphate solubilizing microorganisms are important siderophore producers, due to which the siderophore, it chelates the iron, and iron as well as phosphate is made available to the plants. So these are some, then another reaction, final reaction, as you can say, phosphatase or phytase enzyme, this converts the organophosphorus to acid plus some phosphoric acid plus ethanol or organic acids, you can say. So this is the mechanism of phosphate solubilizing bacteria. There are variety of reactions, like first is acid production, the second is exopolysaccharide production, the third is siderophore production, the fourth is phosphate or the phytase enzyme production, and the acid production, this is the list of acids which are produced. All these collectively make the unavailable phosphate available by releasing it from the component or the compound where it is fixed. So that is the mechanism of phosphate solubilization. So this plant growth is greatly enhanced if phosphate solubilizing bacteria are present in the soil. This is a plate which contains calcium phosphate added in the media, nutrient agar plus calcium phosphate, and in the center a colony of phosphate solubilizing bacteria is added. You can see a zone of clearance here, and this zone of clearance indicates that this insoluble rock phosphate or the calcium phosphate is solubilized by the bacteria, and such phosphate solubilizing bacteria are very easily isolated in the microbiological laboratory. And any microbiologist can easily identify and isolate a phosphate solubilizing bacteria by using special media plates which contain rock phosphate. So this is one such plate which is showing a zone of clearance, means this is the area which this bacteria has solubilized the phosphate. Now this it does by production of organic acids. So soluble phosphates and insoluble phosphates are formed, metal solubilization takes place, and this can be uptaken by the roots. And the phosphate solubilizing bacteria, they also are antibiotic producers, siderophore producers, then exopolysaccharide producers, gibberellins, cytokines, and these compound indole acetic acid, which are produced by breakdown of the plant produced ethylene. Plants, they produce ethylene through the root nodules, and this phosphate solubilizing bacteria, they break down the plant ethylene, and which results into gibberellin, cytokines, deaminase, indole acetic acid, and the root proliferation, that is enhanced uptake of the these material, the phosphate by the root, it takes place, and the plant growth is enhanced. These phosphate solubilizing bacteria are also controlling the phytopathogens. They are also effective in controlling, means they are biocontrol agents, very effective biocontrol agents. So this is the significance of phosphate solubilizing bacteria. So to summarize the significance of phosphate solubilizing bacteria, you can see it is also a good antibiotic producers. Apart from solubilizing the phosphate and giving the phosphate free soluble phosphate to the plants, it also has a very important role in the plant growth promotion. So therefore these are called as the plant growth promoting bacteria also. So antibiotic production is there, soil aggregation is there, support resistance to abiotic stress, means physico-chemical stress which is experienced by the plant, it overcomes that, increases the accessibility of other trace elements. As I said, we are focusing only on phosphorus, but the other trace elements which are fixed or chelated, that is removed, and trace elements like iron, zinc, cobalt, magnesium, copper, these are also made available to the plants. Then a very important area of research, which that is siderophore synthesis and the increased colonization of the chemicals of the bacteria on the root surfaces or near the root takes place. Then it also stimulates nitrogen fixation, and it is a very good agent to control insects and pests, that is, or the fungus and the bacterial diseases. It is a very good biocontrol agent for the plant diseases. So these are some of the beneficial aspects of phosphate solubilizing bacteria. Lastly, I would like to tell you that humans, they have modified the phosphorus cycle throughout these years. The flow of phosphorus has tripled since 1960. If you see this graph of 100 years, this is a graph of over 100 years, how humans have been using fertilizers in tons, okay, or trillions of kilograms per year. So if you see from 19,000 to 2000, or the 100-year span, it is almost tripled, and it is expected that in 2030 the phosphorus mining will be at its peak. This is the fertilizer, use of fertilizer. Now why we are mining phosphorus? To convert that phosphorus into a fertilizer, so it will be at its peak. So this is not a good sign by the humans. Now if you see the phosphorus cycle, which with major harmful human impacts, now see the color coding, the red arrows, they indicate the pathway affected by humans. Concentrate on the red arrows, these are the pathways which are affected by humans. The blue arrows are the natural pathways. The yellow boxes, they show the reservoirs of phosphate, okay, yellow, and this light blue boxes, they are the processes, natural or any process which affects the phosphorus cycle. So first see the red arrows. Humans, they are creating a harmful impact on the phosphorus cycle. So first is, as you can see, phosphate is runoff when phosphate mining is there. This is a phosphate mining area, and mining of the phosphate, it results into mostly runoff into the water bodies. Second is phosphates from sewage. Most of the phosphate, when primary, secondary, tertiary treatment of sewage takes place, in the tertiary sewage, phosphate removal is one important parameter, and that is added into the agriculture, and from there, when it rains, it will be run off into the lakes or sea through streams and lakes. Okay, so that is the second area which is being affected. Third is excessive use of phosphate fertilizer, which agricultural runoff again goes to the inland basins or the water bodies. Now you can see the phosphate is also present in rock phosphate, that is fossils, bones, etc. It is also dissolved in water. It is present in shallow ocean sediments, deep ocean sediments, oceanic food webs, that is a part of the, like the shell of a sea fish or the shell of a snail, which is present in water, that is ocean food webs, it is present. Plate tectonics, that is the geological movement of the plates, that also impacts the phosphorus cycle. So this is how the phosphorus cycle is going out in nature and how humans are greatly impacting this. So why should we care about the nutrients which are added into the water body? Now if you see this here, the runoff coming into the water, runoff coming into the water, runoff coming into the water, all these three red areas I have told is runoff, and it is being added into the water body, and I say major harmful human impact. So why should we be concerned about this runoff into the water body? That is because it largely results into eutrophication of that lake. What is eutrophication? It is a man-made nutrient loading of the aquatic ecosystem. Man-made addition of nutrients into the aquatic ecosystem. Anthropogenic means man-made. When you use this terminology, anthropogenic means man-made addition of the nutrients into the aquatic water system from both point sources and non-point sources. It results into a rapid increase in the rate of biological production of algae. Okay, algae, and mostly it results into not only undesirable water quality but undesirable change, which results into loss of oxygen and death of all the flora and fauna in the water body. Okay, in the freshwater and the marine ecosystem, what is the freshwater ecosystem or what is the marine ecosystem? It should contain a healthy biological activity, clean water, sea or the water animals, insects, fishes growing luxuriantly, balancing the ecosystem. A fresh water ecosystem is completely disturbed by addition of phosphorus into the water body. So these eutrophicated lakes are becoming more and more common. You will see a green layer of algae on a water. It is not a fresh water. It means some organic and inorganic addition of waste is being done into that lake, which contains all the elements, phosphorus, sulfur, etc. And phosphorus, it gives rise to the algal bloom. So phytoplankton blooms. Hypoxia, anoxia means anaerobic conditions, loss of oxygen there in the water bodies. Toxicity to wildlife means the jungles around this are also affected by such algal blooms. Then the marine dinoflagellates, they are killed, the fishes are killed, neurotoxins are created in the shellfish. Freshwater cyanobacteria, they are also killed due to the and they produce neurotoxins and hepatotoxins, which are not only hazardous to the animals which are, or the plants and the insects and fishes which are growing in the water body, but also indirectly to the human population which may be inhabiting the land. So This is eutrophication. And how much does really phosphorus affect? There is a great ongoing scientific debate whether it is carbon, whether it is nitrogen, or whether it is phosphate which is responsible for eutrophication. So here you can see a classical example. The carbon plus nitrogen is also contributing to the eutrophication. Of course, if the water is blue in color, completely blue, blue is a reflection of the atmosphere, okay, and that green is algae, algal blooms present in it. So this is green, light green, and phosphorus contained one lake which has been studied as a case of whether eutrophication is due to carbon, nitrogen, or phosphorus addition. You can see here carbon and nitrogen do also contributes, maybe a bit lesser extent as compared to phosphorus, but the phosphorus, when it is added into lake, this is an aerial view, aerial photograph, and it shows that the complete lake at the bottom, from the surface to the bottom, it is completely eutrophicated, and this is not good for not only the biota, flora and fauna of the lake, but also the ecosystem in and around such huge and heavily eutrophicated system. So this has to be avoided by use of biofertilizers. So finally, lastly, I would like to say that humans, they have greatly influenced the phosphorus cycle by mining the phosphorus, converting it into fertilizers, and shipping the fertilizers and the products around the globe, transporting this phosphorus in food from farms to cities, and impacting the global phosphorus cycle. This is a summarized phosphorus cycle for you. So how can you improve the phosphorus cycle, we humans? What is the aim and objective of studying this phosphorus cycle? So finally, lastly, I would like to say that you can improve the phosphorus cycle by first crop breeding and crop rotation. If you use different crops at different times, that is crop rotation, then phosphorus can be more efficiently utilized, solubilized, and maintained in the ecosystem. Secondly, a crop system design is needed. Means we should know in which environmental conditions, in which pH of the soil, which atmospheric condition, which season, which geographical nature of the soil is suitable for which crop. So this all is called as the crop system design. So effective crop system design, not going with respect to only the cash crops, means crops which will give rise to huge sums of money. Okay, so that is imbalancing not only the water bodies on the earth surface, but also the elemental composition of the nature is also being disturbed. So crop system design can make the phosphorus efficiently utilizable and recyclable. Third is soil organic matter needs to be taken as an indicator of the soil fertility. Now, on what basis do you say the soil is fertile or sterile? Soil fertility has to be taken into account with respect to the soil organic matter and the content and the composition of the soil. So this is not a criteria in today's time, that soil organic matter is not a criteria for soil fertility. And if this is taken, then the role of mineralizing phosphorus can be effectively studied. Fourth is naturally occurring soil fungi can be studied, used properly for solubilization of phosphorus. And humans should recycle and recover phosphorus effectively rather than going through the artificial or the chemical industrial process of producing phosphorus. We should use biofertilizers. So dear friends, this is all about the phosphorus cycle. You can see that though the reactions involved in this phosphorus cycle are limited with respect to microorganisms, but its impact on the ecosystem is very great. So I come to the end of this lecture here, and I would like to tell you the final elemental cycle which we are discussing for your curriculum in my next lecture will be sulfur cycle. So as I say again, go for the next level of understanding, go for the higher level of understanding. This lecture of mine was just a guide for you to understand the basics of the cycle. Exploring it at a greater magnitude, studying it at more deeper level is in your hands. It is up to your interests which should suit you to become a better student of science, a science student who knows everything. Whatever may be the query in your mind, it should be solved, and the ignorance should be replaced by knowledge. That is, unknowing should be replaced by knowing the things. So I hope you a very great amount of success in this endeavor, and I hope you study, read and write all these things and discuss the problems whatever you have with me in whatever and whenever fashion you may find suitable. So till then, my next lecture will be on sulfur cycle. Till then, I hope you enjoy all these elemental cycles and have a greater insight of the nature around us. Goodbye. See you next week in the next lecture. Till then, goodbye.